Okay, welcome to one of our on-demand webinar series. This one is going to be focused, as you know, on Zoho Analytics and preparing some essential reports for the busy season. I have a tendency to refer to Zoho Analytics as simply Zoho. So just so we're all clear, if I only say Zoho, I am talking specifically about analytics, not the whole Zoho suite of possibilities. We've prepared this webinar for you today with the understanding that you could be at a time right now where things are starting to really pick up. I know when I was still working for a DMC, June was the craziest month of the year. So we're hoping that these reports give you a bit of guidance and a bit of help to just keep things under control and make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. This is our agenda for today. So we'll just do a quick introduction and cover a couple of house rules and set expectations. We'll do a little overview of Zoho Analytics in general for anyone who maybe hasn't been in the tool for a while or is still getting to know it. And then we'll look at the 5 reports that we're going to go through with you. Now, 2 of them already exist for all of you in your accounts in Zoho Analytics. The other ones I want to show you are ones that you can create yourselves and customize. We won't have time to go through all of them. So we'll cover what we can, and then the rest of them will be sent to you as shorter videos that you can reference outside of our webinar today. I'm also going to go a bit slower today than I did in the last webinar to make sure everyone is understanding the information and give you ample time to ask some questions. So I'm Jess. I think most of you on this call already know me and my face. I'm now our tour operator advisor and onboarding change manager. So I was a CS executive. Now I'm working more on our onboarding process and making sure our new customers are set up and ready to go. So I'm going to be hosting our webinar today. Thomas Bloom, our customer success lead, is going to be hosting the second version in a different time zone. So you can always follow his as well or watch either of our recordings. And then we've got Sajan Sawant here, who is our Zoho Analytics ninja. Sajan is the absolute best. He knows everything, and he's going to be here to help and support us today in case we run into any questions that I can't answer. And he's just great to have around. So a couple of really quick things. We're going to keep everyone on mute for right now. If you've got quick questions, you can submit them in the chat, which you'll see there towards the bottom of your screen. So if you have a little question as we're going, feel free to type it in at any time. Sajan's going to monitor the chat and I'll check in as well. And then after every section of our webinar today, we will pause for questions and you can take yourselves off of mute to chime in. What I will do is stop after every report example. So you can ask questions then instead of waiting until we finish a whole section. And hopefully that will set us up for better success. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and have a quick overview of Zoho Analytics. Essentially, your information from Tourwriter is constantly mapping to Zoho Analytics. That mapping officially happens once per day. So when you're experimenting in your Zoho account, if you see some information that doesn't look quite right, just keep in mind that maybe your mapping hasn't gone through yet, and the next day everything will look correct and completely up to date. Everything that you have in Tourwriter is mapping to Zoho Analytics. So if there's something that you can't find, we're going to look at some ways today to help you identify the information you need more easily. But if you're ever confused, you can always reach out to us at support and we'll help you find what you think might be missing. We're also going to talk a little bit about what data is versus reports, and this is going to be important for our call today. The reports that we review will have already been made for you, but we'll need your data tables to create reports on your own. So it's important that we distinguish between those two things. And I'm actually going to show you what that looks like right now. Just give me 1 second. There we go. Okay. So this is Zoho Analytics. The difference here that I want to highlight is that we've got this section of reports and this section of data that you should all have access to. I would love to know, just as we're getting started, if you could throw into the chat very quickly, if you have already accessed your Zoho account and if you're able to get into the account and see your data and your reports. I saw Fran's name earlier, so Fran, I know that you already have access. But if anyone else, could you just type yes if you are able to log into your Zoho account and you can access your information, just to make sure that you can see what I see. All right, so your data lives here, and you'll see that this is all listed in these yellow iconed tables that you see on the left. So basically, every piece of Tourwriter is mapping to some of these data tables. You don't have to do anything here. This happens automatically. All of this information feeds through. And if you click into any of these tables, you'll see that it looks very similar to an Excel. And many of the reports that we review today are also going to have this table format. I think it's one of the easier ways to get started in Zoho. And so we'll be focusing more on this Excel style table that you can also export. So that's your data. This lives here. This is all of the raw information coming through from Tourwriter. And as you'll see in some of our examples, these data tables have loads of information. So we've created some reports for you to help you more easily digest that information and manipulate it in ways that is really helpful for you and your business. So we'll be coming into the reports shortly. You'll see that it looks quite different in here. We have 4 different icons that represent the 4 different types of Zoho reports that you can create. That's the tabular view. This is, again, that very Excel style table. A summary view that automatically summarizes some of the important information relating to that particular query that you're running. Pivot view and chart view. So these mirror the same types of charts that you would use in Excel that you've probably made from your own data in the past. We're going to show you how to do some of that directly here in Zoho Analytics today. Specifically, we're going to look at a chart view. Okay, so as I said, we're going to use both data and reports today. We'll look at 2 different types of the Zoho Analytics reports. And I also want to direct your attention to our Help Center because we've got loads of really good information here. So if you come into the Tourwriter Help Center and you just type the word Zoho, you'll find this article. And in case you need a reminder of how to get to the Help Center, within your Tourwriter account, you can just click this little Help link down here in the bottom left corner of your account, and that will launch our Help Center for you. So once you're there, search for the word Zoho. We'll send all of this in our follow-up email today, but you can always come here if you need to. You've got a Zoho Analytics cheat sheet. You can learn about setting up your integration if you haven't already. And then you'll see the standard reports that we have already created for you. We're going to go through number 6 and number 17 today, but I really encourage you to have a look through all of these reports after our call to see which ones are going to be the most useful for you and start implementing these immediately. Okay, so I just want to show you our cheat sheet really quickly. This is a Google Doc that you can copy and save, and you can make this your own. So you can add your own notes as you explore Zoho and create your own references if you need to. You'll see here that all the data tables that I just showed you in your Zoho account are listed here. Most of the names are pretty intuitive and easy to understand, but for the ones that are not, we've got a description so you know exactly when to use these tables when you're building your own reports. So this is a great link to save and reference often. Okay, we're also going to see that reports can be shared in multiple formats today. So one of the things that I used to do when I was a customer was I would create a report for different leaders within my team. So we had a sales leader and an ops leader. I would create reports that were very specific to the information they needed, and then just give them a link, the URL to that particular report. They could save it in their bookmarks, and they never even had to ask me for anything. They would just click the link and find the information that they needed. So it's a great way to keep your team up to date and eliminate the bottleneck of only having one person who understands and can access Zoho. So that's an important takeaway for today. And then, of course, who to contact. You've got our support team. You can email them or you can chat with them right in your account by clicking this blue button down here. In case you missed that or you forgot that it was here, you can always contact us live by clicking that button. Okay. Before we even dive into the first report, I would love to pause there briefly and just see if we have any questions so far on the information that I've shared. You can put it in the chat. Great. Thank you, Carol and Nicole. Thank you for confirming that you're in there. Things are going well. Does anyone have any questions before we continue? I'm already froggy, so I will take a moment to drink. Okay, great. Then let's continue on. Okay, here's what we're going to review today. My goal is to cover 3 reports with you. I'm going to value moving through things slowly and making sure that everybody really understands how this works, rather than jamming in as many reports as we can, because we can easily send some videos to walk you through other examples. So my intention is that you leave this call today feeling more confident in Zoho Analytics and feeling like you're really ready to start using our pre-made reports as well as your own. So I'm going to focus first on our supplier bookings report. This is a report that holds all of your upcoming supplier bookings. And this is great in the busy season because it allows you to do 2 things. The first one is to have a bird's eye view of all of the reservations that maybe haven't been confirmed yet, where you need to spend your time and energy to make sure everything goes well and your suppliers are booked. The other side of that is organizing all of your bookings per supplier. So I remember in the busy season, we could maybe have 27 different bookings with one activity supplier. And although Tourwriter allows you to do a lot of that reconfirmation, I found it very helpful to have one list of everything we had for that supplier for the month. So we'll make sure you can do that by the end of the call today. The next one is the customer arrival chart. So if you've got team meetings every week, for example, where you need to see how many travelers are hitting the ground next week or this month, this chart is going to help you very easily see who's coming when, so that you can plan your staff availability, your on-call hours, and anything that you might need to manage all of those trips. Oh, sorry. Then hopefully we will have time to build our first report, which is incoming payments. So I find it very useful to have an overview of all of the traveler payments that you have received versus which ones are still missing, because we know that in the busy season, days and weeks just disappear because we've got so much going on. So it's a great way to keep on top of all the payments that you have to receive. Okay, and then if we have time, we'll go through some supplier payments. So this is where you can see which suppliers you've paid versus which ones still need to. I remember cases where somehow we forgot to pay a hotel that fell through the cracks, and then travelers arrive and it's not been paid and they're told that they have to pay. And we know that that creates a disaster. So this will help us to avoid any of those situations. And then we've got some reports for our B2B partners. So if you work with agency partners, I always find it very useful to have an overview of what we're doing with each agency and with each individual agent. And it just allows those check-in calls to flow much more smoothly and make sure that you've got all of your T's crossed and I's dotted before the busy season begins. Okay. Sanjan, I can't see the chat. So if we get any questions that are popping up, if you could just alert me if you need me to stop or answer anything, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. I'm already answering them, so no worries.
Awesome. Thanks, Sanjan. Ninja. Okay, so we're going to start now with our supplier bookings report. And this is going to be everything that may need to be confirmed. So let's head back into Zoho. Okay. When you come into your Zoho Analytics and you look at the reports that we have created for you, this will be much cleaner. This is our Tourwriter staging account. And so many of us are in here experimenting and playing around. So we've got loads of different versions of all these reports. Yours will not look quite like this, but you will see the supplier bookings report in your list. And I've already got that open here for us. Right. So what we're going to do is just first have a strong understanding of everything that we see on this page. So as I mentioned before, this one's in tabular view, which is pretty easy to understand. It looks just like an Excel sheet. And what we can see if we scroll to the right is that we've got loads and loads of columns of information. So we've created these reports with the most information you could need in this situation, but we'll show you how to filter out what's maybe not the most useful for you and your business. So we can continue scrolling and you'll see lots of information in here. One thing that you may notice is that some of these columns in Zoho Analytics have a slightly different name from the fields that you have come to know and understand within your Tourwriter account. So we know that that can be a little bit confusing. Most of them are straightforward, but for the ones that are not, within that Zoho cheat sheet that I showed you before, you not only have an overview of all of the data tables, you also have a tab for fields. So you can see what the Tourwriter field name is, how that's represented in Zoho Analytics, and then also which of those data tables house that information. So please rely on this to help you if you're ever confused, but I do find that once your information is in your Zoho account, it's quite clear. I think in our staging account, we make up a lot of tours and itinerary names, so it's a bit more difficult. Okay. So loads of information in here. This is all listed here below. And then here at the top, we see what are called user filters. So just like you would filter out in Excel for that top row of information, we have created filters so you can do the same thing here within any of the reports that you run in Zoho. So if I click on supplier name, for example, I can filter out by any of my hotels, activity suppliers, whatever I want. We can look at Fancy Hotel, for example. These are all of the bookings that we have for Fancy Hotel currently. And I can see the status of the itinerary, as well as the booking status for this particular supplier and that product. Booking status is over here towards the end, here. So I can see that most of these rooms have not yet been requested for Fancy Hotel, and I definitely want to focus my energy on getting those booked. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and edit our design so that we can customize this report and make it our own. But before we do that, I want to highlight a really important step here in the reports that are pre-created for you. And that is that we really recommend you click these three dots right here and you save as for any reports that you are adapting so that they meet your standards. The reason we recommend that is because this report, the way that it's been created, will then always be maintained. So if you make some different versions of this and you want to play around a bit in Zoho Analytics, that's great, but you can always come back to the report that we've created for you. So you can save as and name it whatever you want. So I can put here webinar 2, Zoho, for example. You can save it in a particular folder. You can also give it a description and add some tags. We all know how tags work from working in Tourwriter. Okay. So this is now my version of this report, and I can change, adapt however I want to. I'll take off my filter. Okay. So to edit our design, we're just going to click this big blue button. Okay, and I think this is where some customers get a little bit scared of Zoho Analytics because there's so much information here, but it's actually quite straightforward. Everything here on the left are our columns within our report. So any information that we want to appear or want to remove can be managed here on the left-hand side. All of these columns are basically repeated here in this columns section. You'll see here that all of our columns are listed. So in order to add some columns or remove them, we can just have a look through. And maybe for this particular report, I don't really want to show any pricing information. I can just look for any of these column headers that have a number next to it and say, okay, I don't want any of these to go in here. And as I uncheck them, they will disappear from our columns list as well. So I can say, yeah, I do want quantity, but I don't want the net, I don't want the gross, I don't want any tax information. And I can just remove what I don't need. Now, if I decide I want to reincorporate one of those columns, I can simply click here, or I can grab it and drag it back into my column section. And as you can see, that's also how we move the order of the information that we want to be shown within our report. So if I want the start date to appear towards the beginning, I can grab the start date and just move it up here very easily. Okay. As I'm making changes, you'll see that this blue button appears to generate the tabular view. And this basically lets you preview your report in real time as you're making those changes. So it's a great way to check and make sure everything looks good as you're going through this. But you can always go back to view mode to be taken to your main page and see how everything is coming through. So you can preview that in 2 different ways. I'll go back to edit our design. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about filters. So as we saw before in our view mode, we had these filters here. These are called user filters, but we actually have 2 types in Zoho. The first one is just called filters, and this is to filter out any information that you do not want to be included in the report in any way. If we come in here, you'll see that we actually already have a filter applied. And what we can do is add another one if we want to. So maybe I want to filter by booking status. I can search in my columns. Here's my booking status. And this will show me all the options available. So maybe I don't want to include any bookings that have been confirmed for this report. I just want to see what needs attention. So I'll include anything that has been amended, anything that's waiting for availability, anything that's waitlisted or requested or provisional. And I will filter the report this way. I can see here that those changes are immediately applied. And I'll include that filter going forward. So in my view mode, I won't even see any of the options that have not been selected. Then I've got the option of my user filters. So these are the ones that we saw before on the other page that filter just like Excel does in that top row. I've got supplier name and start date. We could also add, for example, if I wanted to filter out by origin or itinerary ID, for example, you just grab it and drag it, and that filter will automatically be applied. Okay, going back into our table information. One last thing that I'll show you is this group by section and group by block, and then we'll take some questions before we move on to anything else. So let's say within this report, I would find it much more useful to be able to automatically organize this information by supplier, since that's how I'm probably going to process these bookings. What I can do is search for my supplier name within my columns here. So you can't have something in the columns and also in the grouping. You have to choose one or the other. So I'm just going to grab my supplier name and I'm going to move this. Yeah, sometimes when there's a lot of columns, it doesn't let you move it easily. So what I'll do is search for it, supplier name. I'll uncheck it here. So it's been removed from my columns. And then I'll just grab it and drag it into my group by section. What you'll see here is that your supplier name will be on the top row, followed by all the bookings for that supplier. That first one was not a good example because it's just in our staging environment. Let me just scroll to give you a good one. And what you'll see is that row has the supplier name with all of the associated bookings underneath it. Okay, it's taking me longer than I expected to find another example, but they're in here and it will be grouped exactly that way. So this will do it on a row basis with all of the supplier rows underneath it. You can also group by block. So I'll just drag this right on over and give you another example, which is that this one is going to group your supplier within the first column. So you'll see here, I think our first supplier doesn't have a name. It's just listed as null. But if this were the Majestic Hotel in Barcelona, it would say the Majestic Hotel. And then to the right of that, you'd have each column with all the information you have for all of those bookings. So you can really customize this report so that it makes the most sense for you to interpret this information as easily as possible. The last thing we want to do is just save this when we're done making our changes. Zoho Analytics will prompt you to save it if you close it without saving. So you've got that safeguard in place as well. Before we do anything else, I'd love to know if there are any questions from anybody or if you want to take yourself off of mute. Nope. Okay. And we've only got 4 people here today. I'm still going to go through our full run through for the webinar. So anyone who's not here can watch the recording. But if we've got some time at the end, if any of the 4 of you have really specific questions, I think we should be able to tackle those, hopefully. Wonderful. So that's our supplier bookings report. I will show you very quickly how to export that. So we used to export it and then just isolate the information per supplier and send it directly to the suppliers and say, please double check all this, make sure we're on the same page. And then I'll show you the customer arrival chart. So let's dive back into that now. To share this information, you've got the share option here, which allows you to share this view and add the email address of anybody on your team. If you did put a pre-selected filter, so for example, if you put a filter for one supplier, so only that supplier's information was in this report, you could also share this directly with your supplier contact, and they could always have a live view of all of the bookings that they have open with you. So that's a great way to reduce that back and forth time by email as well. So that's, again, share this view. You can put in the email of your supplier or your team member and send this to them. You can also apply permissions so they can't edit this information. Or you can export this as an Excel, CSV, PDF, whatever makes the most sense for you. I forgot this one. We also have just the URL. So you can just copy and paste the URL and give that to your teammate if you want to. And again, that's all in the share or this little icon for export. Okay, let's head in now to our next example, which is the customer arrival chart. As you can see here, we've got this nice bar graph. And what I think is really cool about the way Zoho does this is you can also see these different icons here to change the style of the chart. And you've got a few different options here. These options depend on how you've set up your data and how many factors are included. You can see here you also have a scatter chart. I personally like the stacked bar, so we'll leave it on that one to get started. So again, this customer arrival chart is already listed in your reports. You should see it there when you log in. All right, we're going to go ahead and edit our design, and then I'm going to show you a couple other ways that you can look at the information that's coming through from this main graph page. Okay, this will look pretty similar to our other report. And it's the same idea. Every piece of information that you could include in this report is listed here on the left. You can search those columns and drag and drop what you maybe want to swap out or the different ways you want to change your report information. What we're going to do here is our example is created with the itinerary name on the y-axis. I'm just going to take that out, and maybe I want to see how this is coming together by agent name instead. That's my employee agent. So you can simply click this one to delete it. And then we'll search for agent name and bring that one in instead. So you can see here, depending on the information that you want, you can substitute any of these fields to make this work for you and your team. And I can see here the itineraries that are coming through by month and year for each of the people on my team versus the actual itinerary. And if I want to put that back, I can just search for it again. What did I have in here before? Itinerary name. And then we can continue to generate as we go. Same as before, you've got filters and user filters. So you can use these however you'd like to. For example, if you wanted to edit the filter of what information is pulling. So again, we're focusing on the busy season. This can be done by quarter or it can be done by month. I used to like to do it by month, but of course you have full flexibility here. So if I come into month, I can say maybe I just want to see the next month, and I can generate that information. Or if I want to see, the last 6 months, for example, to do some different reporting on how we've done, you can also do it this way. Yeah, you've got a lot of flexibility here to choose how you want to do it. I don't know that anybody will be down to the hour or the day, but you never know. So those options are here as well. All right. Then maybe we want to add another user filter. So for example, if we want to include the agent name, it's really easy to search for this and just drag it right over, and then you'll see that filter has been applied. We can generate and just see how everything's adapting to the changes that we're making. Okay, we want to, normally I would save this information, but I didn't make a copy. So I'm just going to leave it as it is, and we'll go back to view mode for now. So I just want to show you that depending on the changes that you make and depending on the chart that you're looking at, you can hover over any of this information to see a bit more info. You can also click it to drill down and see some of the underlying data. So if something looks a bit off or you're curious about a particular metric, you can click this to see exactly what's going on within that particular point. For me, I find it to be much more helpful, not more helpful, but additionally helpful when I can also export all of this information to a spreadsheet, because I prefer spreadsheets. Maybe you do too. So you can always come to the underlying data button here. This is really useful. And this will show you all of the information that is feeding into this chart report, but it will break it down in a table format. So you can also do whatever you want with this. You can filter, you can sort. So this functions very much like an Excel sheet, or you can go ahead and just export this underlying data and manipulate that outside of the tool if you want to, or share it with your team. Okay, that is our customer arrival chart. Any questions on this one before we start creating our own, or any questions on some of those other reports that we have created for you that you see here in the Help Center? Okay. Can you all just let me know how my speed is so far? Too fast, too slow? How are we doing? I have a tendency to talk quite quickly, so let's have a little checkpoint on that. And I see Sajan has answered everything that's come through so far. Great. Okay, awesome. Thanks. So we're making good progress then. Okay. Can I just ask really quickly as well, how many of you on the call have actually used one of the pre-made reports already? Is anybody already incorporating them into their analytics or into any of their bookings? Yes, you do. Okay, great. Perfect. And Sajan, we've got a question on archived itineraries. I'm pretty sure I can answer this one. There's a field within Zoho Analytics that basically says if the record is active and it's true or false. So if it's true, it's an itinerary that exists in your database. If it's false, it means it's been archived. Sajan, did I get that one right? Okay. I don't know if there's much to add there, but if you run into any issues, just let us know. Maybe Sajan, I know that the archive field is in a few of our data tables. Let me just pull this up. Yeah, so in the minimum itinerary detail data table, all of those itineraries will come through. So if you have a look at that data table for your account, you can just have a quick look at which ones say true and which ones say false, and you'll be able to see which ones have been archived. That's also great for cleanup at the end of the busy season. I always found it really useful to send the team, the list of itineraries that maybe had the wrong status that we had to just fix up quickly, or ones that needed to be archived. And even with your suppliers, if you run some supplier reports and see that a description's missing for a bunch of them, or maybe inclusions are missing for a few of them, it's a great way in the slow season to get your data cleaned up when you have the time for it. We'll probably do that in another session. All right. Okay, so now we're going to focus on building some of our own reports. I chose this one because I just think it's so easy to lose track of the basics sometimes when everything feels like it's on fire. And of course, the most important part of your business is that you're getting paid for what you're doing. So we'll start with this one and see how much we have time for. So this one is incoming payments due versus paid. You, of course, can call this whatever you want because we're going to create this one from scratch. Just wanted a name that was easy to understand. So let's go back into Zoho. Okay, and back in our reports page, we're just going to create a new report. I am going to use, I have a little cheat sheet for myself here to make sure I don't forget anything. Yeah, I'm going to use a table for this one because I always like the idea of exporting and sending to different team members to have them follow up on these things. And I find that the table view is really easy for that. So we'll create tabular. And then I would love to know from everyone on the call which of these data tables you would use to create a report to track your incoming payments from travelers. Minimum payment detail is what Fran is saying. And Fran is right. So we're going to use minimum payment detail to start this one. All right. Let's head back. My screen seems to be frozen. Just give me a second. Let me refresh really quickly. That's not Zoho, that's my computer. Okay, reports. Create a new report, tabular view, and then as Fran said correctly, minimum payment detail, which I can actually search for. I always forget we can search here, minimum payment detail. Okay. I actually prefer creating my own reports sometimes because I think that I can start with a blank slate to understand what I want this report to look like rather than filtering out what I don't need. So a trick that helped for me was I would write down first everything I wanted to see, and then I would come into Zoho to build the report. I thought that was a bit easier. So I already wrote down my list of the fields I would like to include here, and I'm going to start adding those quickly. So I need the status and the due date are the first couple ones, and I really prefer to search here. I think it saves so much time versus looking for them. Of course, I know the fields well. So again, you can use your cheat sheet if you're not sure what you need to find here. Let's do name, type, and amount. And what's so cool about building reports yourself in Zoho is that you can just continue to see if what you're building is what you really need. So I'm really happy with this so far. And as I'm going through, I can also, move some of these things around if I want to change the order as I go. Okay, let's add a few more. Let's do amount paid, currency, and date paid. Date paid, okay. You'll notice that many fields have this underscore when you've got two words in the name. So that's important to keep in mind as well. I think if I search for, okay. And date paid is still here. Okay, so, yeah, okay. I showed you something wrong. Ignore what I just did. Leave that out of here. Sajan, I don't know if you want to talk at all about the queries, if that's important for people to note here when they're building their own reports. My general recommendation is that you just stick with what you've got on the table here. Zoho talks to itself in different ways in terms of how the data comes through. And I find it much easier to just stick within this table that we've included as we were building this report and just use the fields that are here. And Sajan, if you want to touch on what's going on down here, I think that might be helpful for everybody to understand.
Sure. So there's a difference between the main table, which just already mentioned, but there's also something called as query table. So a query table is nothing but a collection of main tables. So if you want data from, say, itinerary table and also from the payment table, so we can club together and create a new query table that can be used for a report. So the query table can have not just one or two or three, it can have n number of physical tables linked to it. So if you want certain information from many tables, we can create a query table for you.
Yeah, that's like next level Zoho Analytics ninjaing that Sajan is really good at. And that helps you to combine all the different tables into a report that needs components from those different table sets, from those different data sets. But I find that generally in Zoho Analytics, just using the table that we've already included gives you loads of information, and that's usually enough. But if you find yourself in a situation where you're struggling and you can't quite match what you need, just let us know. For the meantime, I've added a bunch of different columns here. Of course, you might want to add others or take out some of the ones that I've put in here. And maybe you want to move around some of these columns as well. I'll put this over here. Okay. All right, so I think that my information looks good. What I'd like to do now is maybe group by status. So here in the section, I will actually pull my status down here. And this will allow me to see the different status options I have on my itinerary. So for example, on my payments. If you're using our Xero integration, you'll notice that some of the information within Zoho Analytics looks a little bit different from our base Tourwriter fields. And that's because we've got that integration speaking back and forth. So when it comes to payments, you might see things like status approved or status draft, and those are related to our Xero integration. That will look slightly different if you're not using Xero at the moment. Okay, so I would like to group by that status to make this really easy for myself. And then if I am using Xero, it'll be super easy to go through and check that I'm approving anything that's not been approved yet, and then those payments can go through. Maybe I also want to add a user filter of due date, let's say. Maybe deposit due date or payment due date. That's not in here because I forgot the underscore. There we go. And then I can sort by the due date of those payments as well. So that makes this very easy and a very user-friendly report. Okay, we could also add some different filters in here if we wanted to, just to weed out information that's not necessary. But the most important thing here is that we're going to be saving this report so that we can always come back and reference this later. And this is where you can really start to build a very useful library in Zoho Analytics. So you could have, for example, a folder of reports that is just for the ops team, a folder just for the sales team, different reports for your leaders, and then you can also have them divided by, regular reports that you want to run. Maybe you want to run this monthly or quarterly just to keep on top of it. So you can name it however you want and then save it in that folder. I'll just call this incoming payments for now. Okay. And then that's saved and I can access it whenever I want to. What questions do we have here, if any? Let me have a look in. Carol, you use Zoho Books for incoming payments. Oh, interesting. So is that another feature of Zoho that maybe I'm not familiar with? Is that like your accounting system, or how does that work? And then while Carol's responding, if anybody has any other questions, just let me know. Okay. All right. Sadan, is there anything you wanted to add on any of those reports, or are you good to continue as well?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, great. And anyone feel free to interrupt. Okay, Carol, great. You use Zoho Books for incoming payments. Okay, yeah, I don't think that the two speak together, but I'm sure that when you export information from Zoho Analytics, you can probably feed it in there, or at least have the information from Zoho Analytics and you can compare it to Zoho Books to see where you maybe have some mismatches there and need to update your accounts in Tourwriter. All right, and Carol, if you have any questions there, just feel free to send them through. All right, we've got about 15 minutes left in our call. So it looks like we will have some time today to look through the supplier payments example as well. We probably won't get to the B2B agent reports, so we will make sure we record a video and send that one out later. I'll walk through the supplier payments a bit more quickly since we've seen a lot of Zoho already and we don't have many questions. And then for the 4 of you who've joined the call today, if you've got some specific things you want to go through, we should have at least a few minutes to address those questions once this report has been demonstrated. Okay. Okay, thanks, Carol. Yeah, we can talk about that outside of the call as well. Lovely. All right, let me go ahead and go back into Zoho Analytics. And we'll go back to our reports page to create a new report. Okay, for this one, for your supplier payments, again, this is tracking any payments that you need to make to your suppliers before your travelers arrive to make sure everything is ready to go and travelers aren't stuck shelling out a credit card because you missed a payment. So this is going to show us what we've paid versus what needs to be paid. Okay, so we're going to do another tabular report. As you can tell, those are my favorite. It's also where I'm the most comfortable. And we are going to have to go ahead and choose our table for this one. So if we have a look through, if anybody knows the answer, feel free to send it in. Okay, this one's pretty straightforward. So I'll tell you that this one is the supplier payments detail. That's this one here. So back in Zoho Analytics, let's just go ahead and search for that. Supplier payment detail is right here. Okay. And then our new report is created. I'll give this a name now, and I'll call this supplier payments due, for example. And we'll start adding all of the information that we need for this one. So I've already got my little list of a couple of columns I'd like to add. I'll just put in a few since I think this part doesn't really need to be demonstrated again. I'll do supplier name, status, amount, and amount paid. Okay. And again, we can group by section or group by block. I think that this is particularly helpful for these types of reports, again, when we're communicating directly with our suppliers to make sure all of our ducks are in a row. So I would typically group this by the section of the supplier name, and I would just pull that right down here. And then we can see we've got the supplier name and everything that needs to be paid to them, and the same thing as we continue through. And again, I think that these reports are especially helpful when you create them with the idea that you're going to use them on a regular basis. So you're not reinventing the wheel every time you need to come in here. So I think that grouping by section is perfect for this report. I might also want to group by status, for example. And one thing I didn't show you before is that you can group both by section and also by block. So if I've got my supplier name in the group by section, that's great. I've got those on the rows. I can also take my status and pull that into the group by block. And we'll see how this continues to develop. So here you'll see we've got the supplier name and then the status here with the corresponding rows to the right. So it's a great way to make this really easily readable and create a deeper understanding of what's going on without doing too much manipulation outside of Zoho Analytics. So we'll go back to our view mode. Again, this is pretty basic. I haven't included much here, but everything here is pretty straightforward. For example, my Auckland hotel, I've got overdue and partial payments that I've got to address. And same thing as I continue to scroll through. Okay, and I can save that one. And that's it. Any questions on this one or questions on creating your own reports in general? I know that sometimes it's tough to ask questions when you're not in it and doing it yourself. It's kind of the same as starting with Tourwriter. You've got to get your hands dirty before the real questions come up. But I'd love to know what questions you have. And if we don't have any, I'd love to open up the group a bit to understand what you have done in Zoho and what's working or not working for you. So we can help you through that a bit in our call today. So firstly, any questions? Okay. And we've got Fran in here. Fran, I know, has been working a lot in Zoho. So Fran, I'm curious if you've got questions generally about the tool. Okay, I'll give it another minute or so for questions. And I'd love to know what your involvement in Zoho has been already. So the purpose of this webinar is to demonstrate some really useful reports to help you through the busy season. But because we've got a small group, this is also a great opportunity to just ask a bit and share a bit about how things are going for you in Zoho Analytics in general. Nicole, I know that you probably haven't been in there for a while because we haven't talked about it in a bit. Okay, let's see. Fran's got some questions about queries. Okay, Fran, is that about queries in general, or do you have really specific questions that maybe we can answer outside of the call? Only because I know queries is quite advanced. So I would encourage anyone here or anyone watching this recording to start with the pre-made reports. Start building your own with the data tables that you've got in your cheat sheet. and get a feel for it first through that process. And then if you are interested in exploring more advanced techniques, of course, you can let us know. Excuse me. Better outside. Okay. Thanks, Fran. I know you've made a lot of progress there, and that you were asking some pretty detailed questions already. So that's no problem if we take that offline. Okay, Nicole's just got access a couple days ago. Okay. Perfect. Yeah, so Nicole, you're in a great spot to go ahead and have a look around with what we've shown you already today. Like I said, those pre-made reports are a really great place to start. And I would encourage you to recreate the reports that we've done in our call today. You'll have the whole recording. And I think I will save that last report for a video recording. So you also have an example that's a bit shorter that you can go back and reference anytime. So you don't have to scroll through the whole recording. So I'll make sure that one gets out to everybody over the next couple of days as well. Great that you're going to get started in there, though. It's going to be really useful for you and the team. Is there any way to have reports showing multi-currencies? Okay, so Sajan, please correct me if I'm wrong. But well, obviously, depending on the report, if you've got payments in there or if you've got supplier bookings in there, the Zoho information should reflect what you have in Tourwriter. So if you've got your supplier set up in USD, the information that pulls through will be USD. If it's in euros, it will be the same. So again, it will be a true reflection of what you've got in your Tourwriter database. Carol, does that answer your question? Or are you hoping for some kind of calculation or something else to happen there with that information? Sajan, I'm not sure if we've got...
I think if you can add the currency for this report, I think that's what you want.
Sorry, I hadn't scrolled down to see your additional comments. How can I show both currencies? Okay. So you have incoming payments in USD and you pay suppliers in euro. So if this were for the supplier payments report, for example, I would imagine that you'd want that to show in euros because you need to see what you have to pay the supplier. For the incoming payments for the travelers, those will come through in USD if you've got your payment schedule set up in USD. So in terms of showing both currencies, Carol, I think it will depend on exactly the information you're pulling into the report and what you want to show in the overall export there. But I think generally, and Sajan, again, correct me if I'm wrong, whatever is in Tourwriter is what will flow through without any interruption or changes, unless we manually make those changes.
That's right. So when you say incoming payments, for incoming payments, it's the itinerary currency that is used. So your incoming payments and itinerary currency would be the same. For supplier payments, depending on the supplier currency, you'll do your supplier payments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, Carol, that should be solved for you automatically because the system is set up to understand and be programmed around those differences. And Zoho Analytics should reflect that exactly the way that it should, according to your Tourwriter setup. But if you run into any snags, let us know. Or if maybe this is something you need to explore and then come back to us with questions, that's completely fine as well.
Yeah, in this report, just supply payments, can you add the currency column as well, so you can see these amounts are in
Yes.
the supply currency?
Yes, absolutely. Let me just get back here. Oh, I'm still here. Sorry, I thought I'd stop sharing my screen. All right, so here we can put in the currency, and maybe I'll also put in the itinerary. No, not the currency code. Let's put just currency. And here we can see the currency coming through. So if you've got more than one currency for some reason, that shouldn't be.
This supply currency.
Okay, I was going to say we can't have more than one currency per supplier, but I know that if you've made changes within your supplier, it's possible that you have one currency in one itinerary, and then if you've changed the supplier record, you'll have a different currency and itineraries coming after that one. So that's why I was confused for a second. Okay. If you have a supplier priced in USD, yeah. So Carol, if that's under your supplier record in Tourwriter, if the supplier's got USD, so if I'm in Tourwriter here, let's say, for example, this activity provider, within my pricing area, this is where you'll choose the currency for that supplier. So if you interact with that supplier in USD, you would set that here. And then this would also filter through any itineraries that the supplier is added to automatically. So you've got that as your standard. And then all of that information on the payments for that supplier will also be set up in USD. So when this is added to an itinerary and I've got to pay them, I don't know, $300 US, USD will come through as a supplier payment currency. Total payments for an itinerary with 2 different currencies. Do you mean incoming payments or supplier payments? Supplier payments. Okay. So in that case, let's say you've got our fancy hotel example. No, I'm sorry. Let's say you've got a family trip example, and within that itinerary, they're going to a few different countries, and across that supplier subset of the suppliers booked for that trip, you've got 3 different currencies. What will happen in Zoho Analytics is that each of those supplier lines will come through in the currency that you need to pay that supplier. When it comes to totaling those currencies, that's probably going to require a manual calculation based on your exchange rate that you're using. There's not a way to do that in Zoho Analytics within your data, but if you export it, you could enter a quick and easy formula to convert into one currency and then total that towards the bottom. Yes,
So this is a question for Carol. So when you say 2 different currencies, is it the itinerary currency and the supplier currency, or is it the supplier currency and a different currency, not the itinerary currency?
Okay, we can give Carol a minute to respond. Carol, you can go ahead and continue typing. We've got just about a minute left for our webinar today. So I just want to show everybody one quick thing, and then we'll stop the recording. And Carol, we can hang around to answer that last question for you. Just want to be mindful of everyone's time. So just to wrap up today, some suggested tasks for everybody on the call or anyone watching is to go ahead and save that Help Center link for Zoho in your bookmarks so you can reference it easily. Save your own copy of that cheat sheet and make it your own. So as you start playing around with Zoho, you have a place to save whatever information you need to make yourself more successful in Zoho Analytics. And I recommend as a follow-up task to save one of our reports and make it your own. Get really comfortable with that process. Export a report, share it with a teammate, make sure everybody has access to that report that you want them to see, and really put this into practice as soon as you can. I know that it's so easy to forget everything we went through today, especially with Zoho Analytics, if you don't look at it again for a few weeks. So I suggest doing this today, tomorrow, or early next week if possible, and then save a report that you like in your bookmarks. Maybe start trying to build some of your own as well. If you've got any follow-up questions, you know where to reach us at support@tourwriter.com, or you can always chat with us within the app. So thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be in touch with all of these links, as well as that little video to show you how to build this last report. Then you've got a nice quick reference that you can always go to. And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for joining today.